Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Greetings of peace, dear viewers. Welcome to another episode of She in Islam. And Ramadan Mubarak. Inshallah, I hope you're enjoying your Ramadan and you're actually getting something out of it for your spirit and for your soul. That's what Ramadan is really meant for. Even though we get hungry and thirsty, even our hunger and thirst is actually to build our souls. Today we have an episode on communication within a marriage. And I am really honored to welcome one of my best friends, Dr. Teresa Lesher. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, Suzanne. Nice to be here.
Nice to have you, really.
you.
I'm so honored and so happy that you're on my show. Dear viewers, Dr. Teresa has a degree, a PhD actually, in information science. And we've been personal friends for almost 30 years. You know, I was just calculating that today. I said, mashallah, we go back a long time to our beginning of our, entering Islam, and we kind of grew in it together.
That's right.
So, mashallah, maybe you can give us some background of how because I don't think I've ever really heard your, details of how you got interested in Islam.
Well, my story is really a typical one in some ways. I was in university, and while I was in university, I met a Muslim. I hadn't known any Muslims before. And so for several weeks, actually 2 or 3 months, this Muslim person was very interested in our culture and in my religion as well. And so I was always telling him about Christianity and trying to explain it.
So you were an active Christian or
yes,
believing
I was an
Christian?
Active Christian,
right.
That's right. And so, he was so interested in it and asked so many questions that I thought maybe he wanted to become a Christian. And so
I saw some hope there.
Yeah, I did.
The same here, yeah.
And so he really required such a deep analysis from me about my religion that it caused me to really look at Christianity very carefully. And that's when I started, feeling I couldn't explain it well enough, or I was frustrated or confused myself. And so one day, out of just total desperation, I just said, well, what do you have? Tell me about your religion. And he said, oh, my religion is Islam. And he started telling me about it, and then light bulbs went off. I thought, that is so logical, that is so simple, that seems really right to me. It felt right in my heart. So it was just a matter of weeks that I became a Muslim. And then I married the same Muslim.
Person.
So yeah, that was very convenient.
SubhanAllah,
Yeah.
mashallah.
Yeah,
Well, it's very similar stories then. I mean, just actually not doubting your own, actually being happy that somebody would be inquiring about your own, and then starting to question because you don't have the answers.
Exactly.
Right, that are getting thrown at you. And then you start thinking, oh, hold on a second. And then they do have the answers to those very same questions.
Exactly, same story.
SubhanAllah,
Alhamdulillah.
Allah, mashallah. Well, today we're here to talk about communication, and especially communication in a marriage. Now, marriage is really important in Islam, and having a good marriage is very important. The Prophet ﷺ had good marriages, mashallah. And that one of the reasons must have been good communication.
For sure.
Right? So, do men and women communicate in the same way?
Well, there have been a lot of books recently on the subject. One of the most famous books on the subject is Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus by John Gray.
Yep, I love those
yes,
books.
Yes, it's very enlightening in some ways. A couple of years before his book came out, there was another book by Dr. Deborah Tannen, and it was entitled, You Just Don't Understand, Men and Women in Conversation. So there have been some studies, both by practitioners like John Gray and by scholars like Deborah Tannen. And they say that while there may not be very significant physical differences in our brains, there are hormonal changes and hormonal differences and cultural differences, and that affects the way we communicate. So they say, yes, there is a fundamental difference in the way we communicate. It's not across all cultures, the differences are not all the same, but let's say the majority of men and women do have basic differences, and they can usually be categorized in a couple of different ways.
Right, which is not a bad thing. To be different is not necessarily bad. We actually could complement each other, right? It's a matter of just understanding what those differences are. So do you know, for example, do we know, do these books, for example, mention some of these differences?
Yeah, they do. For example, if we're talking about communication, so if we take the topic of conversation, in conversation, a woman usually uses conversation to grow close to a person.
Right.
So a woman will talk about some of her, the things that are happening in her life, and she might even discuss some of her problems in life. And then she would be open to hear the events and problems in the other person's life. And this is how women grow close. This is how they build intimacy and closeness.
And she's not necessarily looking for answers to those problems in that conversation,
exactly.
right?
It's
so if
sharing.
you and I'd be talking, let's say I will tell you, oh, today I had a hard day. I'm not asking you to solve my day for me, right? It's just like you listening means I'm telling you, hey, I'm good enough a friend of yours or trust you enough to share that.
Exactly. So this is what women do to grow close. This is how they grow close. However, men use conversation, this is what the scholars are saying anyway, is as a way to build status or to show dominance. So a man would talk to somebody because he wants to tell him something, he wants to give him an order, he wants to give him some advice. Usually conversation is used in that way. Now men, if they want to be close to each other, they want to be friends and build a relationship, they don't sit and talk like women over a cup of coffee for hours and hours. Instead they go out and do something. So for men, activities are a way to build closeness and intimacy. And talking is a way to solve problems or to show one's status in relation to the other.
SubhanAllah. Not one being superior to the other, but it's just two different methods and different ways.
Exactly.
And you know, I was reading in the Mars and Venus books that might actually go back to the days of the hunters and gatherers, because the hunters, you know, the men were the typical hunters. So when they went out hunting the mammoth or whatever, the saber-toothed tiger, they had to keep silent because they had to communicate silently. They did the action together. So hence let's do something together, like let's go play football or watch a game or something. But they didn't communicate because of course that would have made the mammoth run away. So communication was silent. Whereas women who were the gatherers at the time had to communicate for safety. Because so-and-so was in the bushes over there, so-and-so was over there in the bushes, and for safety and to keep that connection, are you okay over there, are you fine? To keep that social connection and safety, they had to talk more and communicate.
That makes
so we'll be back in a second. I'm really interested what else you got to say. So dear viewers, just stay with us and we'll be back in a minute.
One song can change a moment. One idea can change a world. One step can start a journey. But a prayer can change even the impossible.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back, dear viewers. We are in the middle of a very interesting conversation with Dr. Teresa Lesher, who is a very good friend of mine, and we're talking about a very important topic, which is communication in marriage, the differences and similarities between men and women. So we've established that men and women do have different ways of communicating. It's actually most likely a proven fact, that scholars and practitioners have written material on that subject, and that we said that the men and the women are different in that the men communicate either to show dominance or with each other. It's not a matter if men are trying to bond with each other, it's less of a talking with each other than doing things together, and women chit chat. Right, that's what we do.
Right.
Often to the detriment of the men in our lives.
Right.
So one thing that men always have, or husbands especially, always have going on with their wives is nagging. You're nagging me, stop nagging. And the women, on the other hand, will say, I'm not nagging, I'm just reminding you, or I'm just saying it, well, you didn't do it the first time, and so on. So where does that problem of nagging come from, that misunderstanding? Is it just a misunderstanding, miscommunication possibly, or do women really nag?
Well, I think that women can be considered a nag if they don't consider the man's position on conversation. For example, if a man is being asked to do something, remember I said that now conversation is a way of showing status or establishing ranking, pecking order in the group. So when a woman asks a man to do something, he might see it as her attempt to be dominant.
I never thought of it that way. Yes.
To have, to be one up on him, to have the upper hand. And so he would, of course, resist her request because that would be showing that he's the weaker side. if he complies right away. So, of course, if he doesn't do it, then the woman feels she has to ask him again. He didn't listen, he didn't hear me, he forgot. And so, you know, this cycle
You
can
didn't
go
care, blah, blah, blah. So
Exactly.
I have to sort of repeat myself, which she doesn't see as a nag because she's
Right.
just, you know, you didn't do what I've requested. So,
Right.
But I know that that's a big issue of contention in the marriage, often
sure.
that nagging, that he thinks she's nagging and she's just saying he's not doing what he's supposed to be doing.
Right. So there is a way a woman can get around it, though. If she needs something from her husband, and she's aware of the fact that by directly requesting him to do something is going to give him some, you know, some mixed feelings about his status in this relationship, like who's the boss here, she can phrase her question in a different way to reaffirm his dominance or his strength or his ability to
Perceived
make a
dominance,
decision.
probably,
Yeah. So she
Yes.
has to be very careful the way she phrases something. If she wants, for example, him to move a couch for her, she can't do it herself, obviously, she needs his help. Instead of saying, hey, would you move that couch? You know, this is a challenge. But she could say, you know, I'm just not strong enough to move that couch, but you know, your muscles are, can I just borrow your muscles for a few seconds so you can move that couch for me? So in his mind now, he's saying, oh, she has acknowledged my superior strength. And for that reason, she's not challenging my status in this relationship. So I'm going to move the couch for her.
Right, which is not really a show of a woman's weakness or show of a woman's inferiority, but it's just she's using techniques that would actually reach his type of thinking and his type of brain
Exactly.
to communicate effectively.
Exactly.
Because a lot of women might think, oh, well, I'm not going to put myself in the position of being weak, and, you know, especially with nowadays with the feminism movement
Yeah.
going on, so I'm not going to put myself in that position. But it's really just adapting one's techniques of communication towards the male or the female, vice versa as well.
Exactly.
Like you would in another culture as well. If we were going to Japan, we would probably have to adopt their ways of communication. For example, they don't shake hands, so we kind of would do this or whatever the Japanese do. So in order to get through, in order to be accepted and to get through and to make a communication effectively.
Well, the same example goes for business. If you're writing a business letter, there is like a protocol, there's a standard way of writing a business letter. And we all learn that when we go to school and we go to university. So it's just using the same communication techniques that work.
Yes.
So it's not a matter of status or superiority, it's just that this is an effective way for you to get what you want out of this, you know, this exchange, and for me to get what I need out of this too.
Exactly.
So it's just smart communication.
Exactly. So are there any more techniques we could use to overcome our differences and to communicate effectively with each other?
Well, of course, you know, from the Islamic perspective, we can take many good tips from the Quran. I can think of 2 or 3 verses from the Quran, and there's one of them, I have it written down here, I'll just read it to you because...
Yes, please, because it's Quran, yes.
Yes, sure. I mean, this is a translation. From Surah Al-A'raf, which is Surah number 7, it says, "It is He who created you from one soul and created from it its mate, that He might dwell in serenity with her." So before we start any conversation, we should have this peaceful mode. We shouldn't start communicating with any irritation or any hostility or aggression or anything like that, because the goal of our being together is serenity, so we can have a peaceful relationship. So this is one very important verse. And another one is from Surah Ar-Rum, which is Surah number 30. It says, "And of His signs is that He created for you from yourselves mates, that you may find tranquility in them." Again, the same concept. "And He placed between you affection and mercy. Indeed, that are signs for a people who give thought." Now from this verse we have 4 tips. The first one is tranquility. Okay, this is another...
Find that peace and the serenity to start out right.
Exactly, starting on the right foot. And then the next 2 are affection and mercy. In Arabic, it's mawadda wa rahma. So this mawadda or affection means that when you communicate, it should be with some affection. So like the woman who says, "You're stronger than me, can I borrow your muscles to help me?" Okay, this is in a way a bit affectionate, better than giving an order.
Right.
The other word we have from this verse is mercy, okay, and this can be forgiveness, patience, okay, so even when the other makes a mistake or maybe the other forgets how to have this good communication, we can forgive, we can be patient and tolerate for a while. And then the last one, it says it's good signs for people who give thought. So we really should think about our communication with each other. So these 4 tips in one verse give us really all the guidelines we need.
SubhanAllah, so Islam gives it all. I mean, alhamdulillah, we read the Western books and they support, but Islam really has it all there. So we'll be back in, yes, go ahead.
I have one more verse.
Sure, yes, before we go for break.
In Surah Al-Talaq, which is the surah about divorce, there's a verse that says, and don't, it's in Surah Al-Baqarah, don't forget fadla bainakum. Don't forget grace and kindness between you. So in the midst of a divorce, Allah is telling us, don't forget kindness to each other. And so what about in marriage?
Exactly, so, SubhanAllah.
Very important tips.
Islam so rich in giving us tips in communication, and we'll be back in a minute to continue on the same subject. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to our episode, She in Islam, on communication, and communication especially in a marriage. And with me is my dear friend, Dr. Teresa Lesher, and we were talking just in the last segment about how Islam, subhanAllah, has all the answers to all our communication problems and our difficulties. We just have to turn to the Quran, to the Hadith, to find the kindness, affection, like you said, serenity and tranquility need to be established, mercy between husband and wife. So all of these things that would establish already a good base for good communication.
For sure.
And although, like we said, it's not wrong to go towards science nowadays and to look into psychology and add to that now the exact techniques. For example, every era also has its own problems and own ways of communicating.
Sure.
So communication is not necessarily always verbal, is it?
That's true.
So we communicate with our body quite a bit, and probably more so with our body and our stance and our tone of voice, and then verbally. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, you know, I've recently come across this topic, and scholars believe that more than 50% of our communication comes from body language. Another 40% comes from tone of voice. So that means that actually less than 10%, scholars are saying around 7%, comes only from the words we speak. So the body language and the tone of voice has a huge impact on how our message is perceived and received by the other person.
So just to interject, can you imagine, I just got a thought on that, imagine all that texting nowadays going on. You know, how much miscommunication can happen in a text, because it's basically just verbal. It's like you're only working within the range of the 10% that you're able to deliver your message, not having your body there and not being able to put your voice, your tone of voice. And many times there's misunderstandings going on in text, not just between husband and wife, even between friends or colleagues. Or so, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I remember, texting once, and somebody pointed out, she said, never be sarcastic in texting because they won't understand it. They will take you seriously. Exactly. So you really have to use, some sort of way to show your emotions. Yeah,
because you can't really put a hand on a shoulder or something, or other to show it's sarcasm. I didn't really mean it, or I'm joking.
That's
we have those little emoji things going on, but even those don't give
they're not enough.
They're not enough.
In a marriage, it's really important though, because sometimes a wife might be saying something in a nice way, or she might have chosen her words carefully, but at the same time, if she stands with her hands on her hips, this is a power position. Or it's a negative, especially for a man, this is a power position. And so that is showing her dominance again in the relationship. And so if she really wants to have good communication, she should not put her hands on her hips when she's talking to her husband. Another thing that I've seen many women do is when they're talking to their husband, whether it's intentionally, trying to request something or being a little bit assertive or anything, if she raises her eyebrows, if she arches her eyebrows, this is another dominance expression. So Actually, I've seen some women that do that so often that their eyebrows get stuck there. And so this is the kind of person you need to be careful, because this person might really always be trying to dominate over her husband, and that is not received very well, of course, from the husband's side.
And it closes the doors of communication.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, it's not really so much about the having to be the meek, because some of the viewers might perceive it as we have to be the meeker one, we have to be the weaker one, we have to be submissive and all of that.
We have to be smart.
We have to be smart in any kind of communication with anybody, really, so that we can get what we want out of the communication. Exactly. So that we actually, our message, whatever we're trying to deliver, this is our point, right? When we communicate with somebody, we're trying to have the other person receive our message in the way it was intended.
Exactly.
And so that needs to be, done with wisdom, and that's the goal.
Right.
That's the
exactly.
goal. So are there any other ways that we can add effectiveness to our communication? Well, what could husbands do, for example? Is there anything a husband could do, for example, to communicate with his wife?
Well, I think a husband really has to consider how important communication is to his wife.
Yes.
Communication is so important to her. This is how she builds a relationship with somebody. So if a husband is feeling like he wants to get close to his wife, the best thing he can do is sit down and have a chat with her. And even more important than talking to her would be listening to her. A woman always feels she draws closer with somebody when she's heard and understood. Mm-hmm. So if he wants to draw close to his wife, he has to make time for her to talk a little bit and listen a lot. And that doesn't mean listening while he's texting or while he's watching a movie. It means undivided attention. This would be perfect.
I mean, we women, we understand that, how much that would mean.
Yes.
Right? And how much that actually goes a long way.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, your problem sometimes, I mean, we're speaking now from a women's perspective, and we can tell our brothers, it's a take it from us. It really works. It does.
Yes.
I mean, all we need is to, our brothers, our husbands, to say nothing. It's just to, an occasional, okay, I got you, I understand, I hear you.
Yeah.
That must have been hard, and that's
Exactly.
it, and our problem's gone.
The problem is that a lot of men, when they hear women, especially if they start talking about their problems or challenges or their worries, they feel they have to give a solution.
Yes,
because this is what men do. This is what men do with each other, is they offer their advice. But a woman is not always looking for a solution. No. She just wants to be understood.
If she's looking for a solution, she will actually word it. Please, I need help with that. Can you give me an advice?
Exactly.
But usually if we just start opening up, it's just listen, and our problem is solved just by having a listening ear.
Exactly.
Right. So unfortunately, a lot of the miscommunication happens because, like you said, the man expects a solution is actually expected of him.
Yeah. Where it's not. And the woman doesn't want the solution. I think maybe one thing that we as women, because of course we can only control ourselves, we can only change ourselves. We cannot, even in a marriage, expect the other person to change. We can only change our own attitudes in our own selves. Right.
So possibly what wives could do, or husbands could do, either one of them, is to get that information for themselves, educate themselves on techniques of communication, and then bring that to their partner and say, before you sit down and say, look, all I need you to do is listen.
Yeah.
Right? I don't need you to get the solution to me. I just need to have a listening. It's 5 minutes of your time. If you know that, if you have the knowledge, equip yourself, you can let the partner know. So we'll be back in just a minute with that interesting topic.
M is for the million things she gave me. O means only she's growing old. T is for the tears she shed to save me. H is for her heart of purest gold. E is for her eyes with love light shining. R means right, and right she'll always be. Put them all together, they spell mother, a word that means the world to me.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We are really in the middle of a very fascinating topic, and that is communication between husband and wife. What are the challenges and how we can overcome them? And with us is Dr. Teresa Lesher on that subject, and we're having a really nice conversation. I'm really enjoying this. So Dr. Teresa, what are some tips we can give wives and husbands to improve their communication with each other?
Well, something that both parties can do, it's something very simple, is, well, I have two pieces of advice. The first one is when you're trying to show your feelings, you should use I messages. You say, I feel this way or I feel that way. Instead of pointing the finger and say, you always do this and you always do that, you can just say, I feel bad about, what happened today. Instead of saying, that was really something stupid you did today.
Exactly.
So by turning it around and saying how you feel, it's a way of communicating.
Yes.
And the other thing is that we should try to avoid using superlatives like always and never. You always do this, you never do that, where in fact we know that it's not true. Of course we all try our best in relationships, and sometimes we make a mistake and we should forgive and overlook. And if we have to criticize, you could say, once you did that and I was uncomfortable.
So keep it real. Keep it real the way it really happened. Don't overdo it, don't over exaggerate.
Yeah.
Right.
It helps a lot.
Yeah, of course, yeah, definitely. Now we are living in Kuwait, and Kuwait has become such a multicultural country, and there's a lot of intermarriage between cultures. So we have people from all over the world, whether it's the Western world, the Arab world, the Indian subcontinent. We have Southeast Asia, so many different, Africa. So of course there must be some difficulties or differences in communication, not just men and women, but add to that the cultural factor. So what are some of the differences that could happen, like for example, or how can we overcome them?
Well, of course there are so many differences that can happen between cultures, so many different cultures, but the most important thing is that each person should take an interest in the other culture to try to understand it, their communication styles, what's considered polite and what's considered impolite. And when they have this knowledge, it will be easier to interpret a situation. Maybe if your husband got upset, you would try to understand it from his point of view. It's very useful to have a friend who's from the same culture, so you can ask her, this happened and my husband was really upset, I don't know why. And so this helps, but I think, of course, in the end, the bottom line is that we can always go back to the principles that we learn from the Quran and the Sunnah, those principles of tranquility and serenity, of politeness and kindness with each other, of mercy and affection. If we can remember these principles in our marriage, then we can't go wrong.
Because that's what pulled us together into the marriage in the first place, right?
Exactly.
As being Muslims. We marry each other, and the thing that we can always share, no matter how different our cultures are is our deen, is our religion, subhanallah. That is very interesting. MashaAllah, thank you so much. It was such an honor and just real pleasure to have you on the program.
I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Me too. And
very important subject.
We could probably continue once
for hours.
Once we stop recording, we're probably going to continue over a cup of coffee. I'm sure we are. So thank you so much for being here, and I'm hoping to have you on the program again, inshallah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear viewers. I'm glad we could share this very interesting topic with you. We hope you were able to get something out of this for your marriage, or maybe for a sister's or brother's marriage. If sometimes they share their problems with you, you can give them some advice. We hope you have a wonderful iftar tonight, and inshallah, don't forget to pray your Taraweeh prayers. That time in Ramadan doesn't come back around till another year, so make use of that special time, and we will see you inshallah tomorrow with another episode of She in Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.